Hi everybody, this is Anne. Everyone who starts out working with clay learns how to create the most basic shapes like straight cylinders and circular bowls. Once we become more confident with the basics, we want to experiment with ways to alter the shapes for more individual, dramatic, and expressive forms. In this video, I'll demonstrate several ways to alter the basic forms to create what's referred to as lobes. We most likely think about lobes at Halloween, when we alter round forms into pumpkin shapes. But in this video, we'll work on more functional forms. First, I'll throw a milk bottle shape and lobe it at the bottom. I centered the clay and opened up the floor. I began pulling up the walls. I then collared the cylinder to pull the wall inward. If you want to see a video on how to throw taller, check out the link above. I trimmed the rim and flattened the top a bit. I used my red rib to smooth the surface. I trimmed some excess clay around the bottom to create a rounded foot. To create the illusion that the clay is rounder at the bottom, I'll use this throwing stick to push the clay outward along the foot. I could have pushed outward even more, but I wanted to show you that you don't need to over-exaggerate the curve to create the illusion. Again, I used my red rib to straighten the form. I need to divide the form into sections. I placed 2 bamboo skewers over the rim and centered the trimming spinner over those. All the purple marks on the spinner divide the circle into fifths, so I'm marking the rim along those marks. I want to extend those divisions to the foot. Using the bamboo stick, I held it vertically on the bat, lined up to each rim mark, and pushed the stick lightly into the clay where it bowed out. I then used my fingers, pushing those areas inward to exaggerate the indentations. With a wet finger, I rounded the bottom of each lobe. To echo the new foot shape, I also used my fingers to round the areas between the rim marks. My form still had a rounded foot ring under the lobes. I wanted the lobes to seamlessly extend to the bottom edge, so I pinched away the clay in each groove, rounded it, and smoothed the area in the grooves once again. When it's drier, I'll again rib the clay smooth. Now here it is, all cleaned up at the bone dry stage. You can see how the lobe transitions nicely to the foot. I made this one earlier. I've already decorated it and bisque fired it. I strategically glazed and fired it to cone 5 to make this elegant piece. The lobed shape creates 5 highlighted canvases for me to paint my poppies on. Now here's a variation of that idea where I created the lobes on the top part of the piece and at the bottom of the spherical body. Here's another variation where I lobed the piece 3/4 of the way down. If you have a taller piece and aren't confident about creating straight divisions of the form from the rim, I'm going to show you an alternate way to make it accurate. I threw the taller piece, then wired the piece from the bat and removed it. I centered the trim spinner on the bat, placed a straight edge along each purple mark and across the center hole, and marked the bat with a pencil. I replaced the piece to the center of the bat and marked a light horizontal line along the body so I know how high to mark my piece. This time I'm using a carpenter's square against the bat to make true straight vertical lines up to the mark that I created. Now I can use the bamboo stick to push the clay inward along the lines. Again, I use my fingers to accentuate and pinch in those lines. I rounded the clay along the bottom of each lobe to further that illusion. Instead of my finger, I used the pointy edge of my wooden rib to notch out the bottom foot ring to create this lovely lobed bottle. You can also create lobes on the rim of a piece. In this case, I threw a rounded bowl. Again, I centered the trim spinner over the bowl and marked the piece in fifths. Holding my fingers along the edges of each section, I stretched the rim outward to form each lobe. You can extend the lobe to stretch as far as you want into the body of the bowl. I continued around the bowl to create an almost flower shape. To make sure each lobe is straight, while slowly spinning the wheel, I held my finger at the outer edge, adjusting how far the clay should extend. I then held my finger stationary along the inner part of the bowl to make sure those inward edges are at the same angles. And here it is, all ready to be decorated. Now let's do a fun hand-building project with the lobes. First, I'll construct a mold out of a styrofoam half-sphere so I can create the basic form. In this case, I'm making a football-shaped bowl. To divide the styrofoam into quarters, I ran a piece of string around the circumference and cut it where the edges met. I folded the string in half and marked it. I folded that in half again and marked those areas. I put the string back around the foam and marked all 4 quarters. I then ran a piece of masking tape over the center to the north and south points. I used a roll of masking tape as a guide for a circle shape. I centered it over the gridded lines, then marked around the outer edge of the circle. I used an X-Acto knife to cut along the side of the tape. I also used the X-Acto to cut around the circle mark. I removed the cutouts, and when I put the halves together, they formed a football shape. I simply tape the edges back together. The cleanest, best fitting way to make a bowl in this mold is to create template pieces starting with a clay slab. I cut a slab piece a bit larger than one side of the bowl. I lined it with a piece of plastic wrap, then fit the clay down into the mold. I used a red rib to stretch the clay into the form. I cut the clay along the rim, then turned over the form and cut the clay along the foot. I then cut the clay from each mold corner. I carefully took the clay out of the mold and placed it on a piece of paper. I traced around it and cut it out to make the template pieces. I also traced the bottom hole and cut that out. Now I can cut out the clay, angle cut the sides and bottom, then slip and attach the pieces to make a bowl. Here's one I made the day before so it could set up. For the lobes, I lightly marked lines down the 2 corners of the bowl. I measured out 1 inch along each side of the corners and lightly marked down these lines as well. I took the bowl out of the mold and pinched inward along each of the last marks I just made. I made sure I stretched out the clay at the corners as well. I then stretched out the lobes on the sides until I got the shape that I wanted. Here's a bisque-fired one that I made previously that's all decorated. I slipped dots on it, glazed it, and fired it to cone 5. I love how the flower-shaped lobes echo the flower decorations. Hopefully this technique will inspire you to experiment with other ways you can alter your pieces to create more dynamic and unique pottery. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.